In recent years, scientists and engineers have started working on something that sounds like a movie, but is very real: the first ship that will take people to live on another planet. What used to be just a dream is now becoming a real project, with designs, calculations, and ideas that change everything we knew about space travel. This ship would not be like the small capsules we know today. It would have to be huge, the size of a small city, able to carry thousands of people for decades or even centuries through the dark emptiness between the stars. But here is the problem that keeps scientists awake at night. How do you keep people alive for so long far from home, without Earth to protect us? Get ready to fall asleep while you listen to this video and discover how humanity plans to take the biggest step in its history. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment what part of the world you're watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Imagine this. You're sealed inside a metal can, and outside is nothing. Not just the empty black of a moonless night, but the true, perfect, airless void of interstellar space. This can has to hold and hold perfectly for longer than your great-grandparents lived. That is the absolute, non-negotiable starting point for our first interstellar colony ship. Its hull isn't just a shell. It's the only thing standing between every single life aboard and instant, absolute oblivion. For a journey measured in centuries, this structure has to be more than strong. It has to be eternally vigilant, smart, and adaptable. We are not talking about the aluminum skin of a rocket. We're talking about a fortress, a city wall, and the very ground beneath your feet, all rolled into one singular, monumental barrier against the cosmos. So what do you build this eternal home out of? The answer is not one thing, but many layers, each with a deadly serious job. Think of an onion if each layer stopped a different kind of cosmic death. The outermost layer faces the most direct physical threat: micrometeoroids. These are tiny, some just grains of dust, but when you are moving at a fraction of the speed of light, they hit with the energy of a bullet. A solid wall thick enough to stop them all would be impossibly heavy. So we use a clever idea called a Whipple shield. Picture two relatively thin skins with a gap between them. The first skin vaporizes the incoming particle on impact, spreading the energy out into a cloud of gas and debris that then harmlessly splatters against the second skin. It is like wearing a fine mesh over your armour. It turns a deadly spear tip into a harmless splash. Behind this bumper, the real hull begins. We are talking about composites woven at the molecular level, carbon nanotubes and graphene in matrices, creating materials with a strength-to-weight ratio that makes steel look like wet paper. But even these can fatigue, can develop microfractures over centuries of stress from thermal cycles and constant radiation bombardment. That is where self-healing alloys and polymers come in. Imagine a material laced with microscopic capsules of liquid monomer. When a crack forms, these capsules break open, the liquid flows into the gap, and a catalyst triggers it to harden, seamlessly welding the crack shut. The hull literally heals its own wounds. But the hull's job is not just to keep things out, it is also to keep a very specific environment in. That means containing an atmosphere at a comfortable pressure, while the outside pressure is zero. The force trying to blow your home apart like an overinflated balloon is immense, and the structure has to handle that load forever. The shape is critical here. A sphere is the strongest shape for containing pressure, but it is not a very good shape for a city. The solution that emerges is a cylinder or a torus, a ring. This shape is strong, efficient with materials, and crucially, it can be spun. And spinning is the only practical way we have to create artificial gravity for a multi-generational voyage. Without gravity, human bodies fall apart, bones dissolve, muscles waste away, hearts weaken. So, the entire habitat section of the ship, the part where people live, work and grow food, will likely be a gigantic rotating cylinder or ring. The spin flings everything outward, creating a force on the inner wall of the cylinder that feels just like gravity. So, your hull is now also your ground. You stand on the inside curve of the cylinder, with the sky being the central axis running down the middle of the ship. This spin gravity dictates everything about daily life and the hull's architecture. Now, spinning a massive structure introduces its own set of insane engineering problems. The forces are titanic. The hull has to handle not just internal pressure and meteoroid impacts, but also the relentless tensile stress from being spun like a giant centrifuge for 100 years. Every weld, every bolt, every composite strand has to be perfect and remain perfect. And then there is the issue of size. To make the artificial gravity feel natural and to minimise the Coriolis effect, which would make you feel dizzy every time you moved your head, the rotating section needs to be huge. We are talking about a radius of hundreds of metres, perhaps even a kilometre. The hull, therefore, is not a small thing. It is the single largest structure humanity has ever built, and it has to be built in space, likely from materials mined from asteroids or the moon. It is a project that would make building the pyramids look like a weekend hobby. But this size also helps with another critical function: radiation shielding. Interstellar space is filled with deadly cosmic rays, high-energy particles from distant supernovae that slice through DNA like tiny blades. The Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect us. The ship's hull must do the same. This leads to the next layer of our onion, the radiation shield. Pure lead or steel shielding would again be far too heavy. The best shielding actually comes from materials with lots of hydrogen atoms, like water, plastics, or polyethylene. So, the design of the ship will integrate its resources into its structure. The water supply for the thousands of colonists, used for drinking, agriculture, and as a component of the life support system, will be stored in tanks strategically placed around the habitation decks. Those water tanks do double duty as a radiation barrier. Similarly, the ship's fuel reserves, food stores, and even the soil from the agricultural sectors can be positioned to create a storm cellar effect, where the thickest mass is between the crew and the outside universe. Some concepts even imagine creating an artificial magnetic field, a mini magnetosphere around the ship to deflect charged particles. But the primary passive always-on shield will be the hull itself and the mass of the ship's supplies integrated into its architecture. All of this so far assumes a static structure, but a voyage lasting generations cannot be static. The ship must be able to grow, adapt and repair itself on a scale we can barely imagine. This is where the concept of modularity and a smart hull comes in. The primary structure will have hardpoints, ports and standardized interfaces. Imagine the ship starting as a core of essential modules: the propulsion spine of the primary habitation ring, the command and life support center. As the population grows over the decades, new habitat rings can be added, constructed from prefabricated sections launched from the core, or manufactured in situ from raw materials. The hull becomes a living skeleton capable of extension. Furthermore, the hull will be studded with sensors: acoustic, strain, thermal, radiation. A network of these sensors will feed data to the ship's central artificial intelligence, creating a real-time health map of the entire structure. It will know if a strut is under unusual stress, if a micrometeoroid impact has compromised a seal, or if a self-healing patch is not setting correctly. This system can then dispatch repair robots, from swarms of insect-sized bots that can crawl into ducts and weld cracks, to larger, more capable external drones that can perform spacewalks no human ever could. This smart, layered, rotating fortress is not just a container, it is the world. Its design determines the social and psychological reality for everyone born within it. The curvature of the hull defines the horizon. Its strength defines their safety. Its ability to self-repair defines their future. The engineers who built it will be long dead when their great-great-grandchildren are born in its agricultural modules. Therefore, every single design choice is a covenant with the unborn. A mistake in the welding technique, a flaw in the composite formulation, an underestimation of metal fatigue over 2 centuries. Any of these could be a silent, delayed death sentence for an entire generation that will never know Earth. This pressure makes the hull the most profound piece of engineering in human history. It is not just about physics and material science, it is about trust across time. The men and women who seal the final hatch and initiate the acceleration burn are placing an unimaginable faith in their own work, a faith that must endure longer than most nations on Earth have lasted. The hull is the physical manifestation of that faith. It is the bubble of biology in the abiotic desert of the galaxy. It is a defiant statement that life is not just a fragile accident on one lonely rock, but a force that can wrap itself in ingenuity and steel and stride out into the dark. Every gram of its composite, every self-healing capillary, every sensor node is a vote for a future. It is the eggshell for an embryo of civilization, and it must be flawless, because out there is no room for error, no possibility of a rescue mission, no second chance. The hull is all there is, so we have built our fortress, a rotating cylinder of self-healing composites and water shields designed to last centuries. But a fortress is useless if it just sits there. To fulfill its purpose, this entire world must move. It must accelerate away from Earth, cruise through the void for generations, and then, at the right moment, slow down to meet its new star. The systems that make this happen are not just engines. They are the beating heart of the mission, and their choice dictates everything else. Forget the chemical rockets we use to get to orbit. Burning liquid fuel for a 100-year journey is like trying to drive around the world on a single tank of gas by carrying a flawless, because out there is no room for error, no possibility of a rescue mission, no second chance. The hull is all there is, so we have built our fortress, a rotating cylinder of self-healing composites and water shields designed to last centuries. But a fortress is useless if it just sits there. To fulfill its purpose, this entire world must move. It must accelerate away from Earth, cruise through the void for generations, and then, at the right moment, slow down to meet its new star. The systems that make this happen are not just engines. They are the beating heart of the mission, and their choice dictates everything else. Forget the chemical rockets we use to get to orbit. Burning liquid fuel for a 100-year journey is like trying to drive around the world on a single tank of gas by carrying 1,000,000 gas cans with you. The math simply implodes. For an interstellar arc, we need something with incredible endurance and mind-boggling efficiency. We need to squeeze every last bit of push out of every single atom of fuel we carry. This brings us to the first plausible candidate, nuclear propulsion, which will journey out of the inner solar system. But for the main long-duration cruise between stars, we likely need to think even bigger. The next step up is nuclear fusion propulsion. This is the process that powers the sun, fusing light atoms like hydrogen into helium and releasing colossal energy. If we could harness controlled fusion for propulsion, a massive if, it would be a game changer. One concept is the fusion rocket, where tiny pellets of fusion fuel are ignited, either by lasers or magnetic compression, in a reaction chamber. The resulting plasma, a soup of incredibly hot charged particles, is then directed out the back by powerful magnetic fields, creating thrust. The exhaust velocity would be a significant fraction of the speed of light, making journeys to nearby stars conceivable within a human lifetime, say 50 or 60 years. That is a crucial shift. It changes the mission from a multi-generational arc to a single-generation ship, where the crew that leaves might still be alive to see the destination. The challenges, however, are monumental. We have not yet achieved sustained energy-positive fusion for power generation on Earth, let alone in a compact or reliable space-worthy engine that must fire continuously for decades. The engineering of the magnetic nozzles, the handling of the insane heat and neutron radiation, and the sheer scale of the machinery are all hurdles of the highest order. But if it can be done, fusion represents perhaps the most plausible bridge between known physics and practical interstellar travel. Then we have the concepts that leave fuel behind entirely. Enter the idea of the light sail, or more accurately, the beam-powered sail. Picture a vast, incredibly thin, reflective sail attached to our ship kilometers across. Instead of carrying fuel, the ship is pushed by light pressure from an enormous laser array stationed into the solar system, perhaps orbiting the sun. This laser beam, powered by solar energy or other means, is focused on the sail for years, gently but continuously accelerating the ship to a tremendous speed. The beauty is that the fuel, the energy, stays at home. The ship carries only its payload, making it much lighter and faster. You could reach 20% of light speed or more, but the problems are stark. The laser infrastructure required is almost unimaginable, a solar system spanning project in itself. The sail must be flawless and gigantic. And then there is the showstopper for a colony ship. How do you slow down? You cannot turn the laser off and coast because you would fly past your target at a blistering speed. And you certainly cannot brake with a sail pointed back at a laser that is now light years behind you. Some ideas involve sending in a head probe to build a laser at the destination star to slow you down, or using a mag sail to plough through the destination star's solar wind. But for a massive first-wave colony ship that must carry everything to survive and establish a foothold, the braking problem makes pure sail concepts difficult. They might be perfect for small, fast robotic probes, but for our city ship we likely need something that carries its own braking power. This leads to the ultimate, terrifying and purely theoretical pinnacle of propulsion, antimatter. Antimatter is the perfect opposite of normal matter. When a particle meets its antiparticle, they annihilate each other, converting 100% of their mass into pure energy according to Einstein's famous equation. This is the highest energy density possible in physics. A few grams of antimatter could provide more energy than the space shuttle's external tank full of chemical fuel. For propulsion, you would direct the energy of matter-antimatter annihilations to heat a propellant or create a direct plasma exhaust. The performance could approach that of a fusion rocket, or even exceed it, making journeys of serious fractions of light speed possible. So why is it not our obvious answer? Because antimatter is the most diabolically difficult substance in the universe to handle. We produce it in minute quantities, atom by atom, in gigantic particle accelerators. To make enough for an interstellar journey would require planetary-scale energy budgets, and manufacturing a few grams of antimatter could provide more energy than the space shuttle's external tank full of chemical fuel. For propulsion, you would direct the energy of matter-antimatter annihilations to heat a propellant or create a direct plasma exhaust. The performance could approach that of a fusion rocket, or even exceed it, making journeys of serious fractions of light speed possible. So why is it not our obvious answer? Because antimatter is the most diabolically difficult substance in the universe to handle. We produce it in minute quantities, atom by atom, in gigantic particle accelerators. To make enough for an interstellar journey would require planetary-scale energy budgets and manufacturing facilities far beyond our current civilization. Then you have to store it. You cannot put it in a jar, it would annihilate the jar. You must suspend it in a perfect vacuum within incredibly strong magnetic fields, a process called a penning trap. Any failure, any power fluctuation, any tiny bit of matter touching the antimatter simplifies the social engineering dramatically. It might only be 2 or 3 generations born aboard. But it requires technology that is currently beyond our grasp. A slower, more conservative nuclear thermal, or even a large-scale electric ion drive powered by a fission reactor might be within our nearer-term capabilities, but it condemns the mission to a multi-generational journey of perhaps 500 years or more. That choice then dictates the size and complexity of the closed ecosystem, the scale of the cultural project, and the psychological load on the crew. Furthermore, the propulsion system defines the mass budget. Every ton of engine and fuel is a ton that is not habitat, not food, not water. There is a brutal calculus here called the tyranny of the rocket equation, where adding more fuel to go faster also adds more mass, which requires even more fuel to push that extra mass in a vicious cycle. This is why efficiency, measured by that specific impulse number, is so holy. The engine also defines the profile of the journey. It is not a jump to light speed moment. It is a long, patient, continuous push. The ship would accelerate at a gentle rate, perhaps a fraction of Earth's gravity for years, maybe decades. Then it would coast, its engine silent, for the vast middle of the voyage. Finally, as the destination star grows from a point of light to a disk, the most critical phase begins, the braking phase. The entire ship must be rotated 180 degrees, and the engines fired again with the same patience and duration as the initial acceleration, to slow down enough to be captured by the new star's gravity. This braking maneuver is just as fuel-hungry as the acceleration. You have to carry all that braking fuel with you the entire way. This is why some concepts, like beam-powered sails, are so appealing and so frustrating. They solve the acceleration problem, but leave the braking problem almost insurmountable for a large ship. In the end, for our first colony ship, the propulsion system will likely be a compromise, a balance of near-term feasibility and long-term reliability. It may well be a hybrid, a nuclear thermal or advanced fission electric system for major maneuvers, combined with auxiliary technologies. The ship might use a magnetic sail to interact with the solar wind of our sun for an initial boost, and then again with the destination star's solar wind for final braking, supplementing its onboard fuel. The key is redundancy and robustness. The engines must be maintainable by the crew's descendants, using tools and knowledge preserved for centuries. They cannot be black boxes that no one understands. They must be in a sense simple and brute force enough to be reliable, yet advanced enough to make the journey possible. They are the legacy systems upon which all future generations depend, a dormant mechanical god that must awaken on command centuries after its creation to perform its final and most vital task. The people who light that initial burn are not just launching a ship, They are lighting a fuse on a promise that will take centuries to reach its conclusion. The propulsion system is that fuse, and the engine's final, successful ignition at the journey's end is the fulfillment of an ancient covenant between the past and the future. The propulsion system decides how long the journey will take, but the life support system decides if anyone will be alive at the end of it. This is the ultimate tightrope act. You have thousands of people, and their children and their children's children, sealed inside a machine for centuries. You cannot run out for groceries. You cannot open a window for fresh air. Every single molecule of water, every atom of carbon, every breath of oxygen must be used, cleaned, and reused in a near-perfect loop. This is not just a machine, it is a synthetic, ultra-managed biosphere, a tiny, fragile copy of Earth's processes crammed into the hull of a ship. The goal is staggering, to recycle 99.9% or more of all water, air, and organic matter. Forget reduce, reuse, recycle is a nice slogan. Here, it is the absolute law of physics that will keep you alive. So how do you build a mini-planet that fits inside a can? It starts with the hard mechanical systems, the technological kidneys and lungs of the ship. These are advanced versions of what we use on the International Space Station, but scaled up immensely and designed for century-long reliability. Water recycling is the most critical. Every drop of urine, sweat, humidity from breath, and wastewater from showers and kitchens is collected. It goes through a multi-stage process of filtration, chemical treatment, and likely distillation or reverse osmosis. The aim is to recover pure H2O. Modern systems on the ISS already recover about 90% of water. For a generation ship, that number needs to be so close to 100 it is not even funny. The goal is staggering, to recycle 99.9% or more of all water, air, and organic matter. Forget reduce, reuse, recycle is a nice slogan. Here, it is the absolute law of physics that will keep you alive. So how do you build a mini-planet that fits inside a can? It starts with the hard mechanical systems, the technological kidneys and lungs of the ship. These are advanced versions of what we use on the International Space Station, but scaled up immensely and designed for century-long reliability. Water recycling is the most critical. Every drop of urine, sweat, humidity from breath, and wastewater from showers and kitchens is collected. It goes through a multi-stage process of filtration, chemical treatment, and likely distillation or reverse osmosis. The aim is to recover pure H2O. Modern systems on the ISS already recover about 90% of water. For a generation ship, that number needs to be so close to 100 it is not even funny. Solid waste, from human feces to inedible plant matter, is not waste at all. It is a vital reservoir of nutrients and chemicals. Through processes like pyrolysis or anaerobic digestion, it is broken down. Carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are recovered to become fertilizer. The resulting methane or other gases can be fed back into the energies and provide specific wavelengths of light optimal for photosynthesis, wasting no energy on light spectra plants do not use. Every aspect, temperature, humidity, Colorado, 2 levels, nutrient concentration, is monitored and controlled by the ship's AI. The selection of crops is a science in itself. You need high-calorie staples like wheat, rice, or potatoes, genetically optimized for yield, nutrition, and growth in controlled conditions. You need protein sources, which could come from legumes like soybeans or lentils. You need vitamins and variety, so fast-growing leafy greens, carrots, tomatoes, and berries are essential. But space is at a supreme premium. So plants might be dwarf varieties grown in vertically stacked layers to maximize use of volume. The agricultural section is not just the ship's pantry, it is one of its primary life support systems. The plants absorb the CO2 the crew exhales and through photosynthesis release fresh oxygen. They are part of the water cycle too, transpiring moisture that can be condensed and returned to the reservoir. In a very real sense, the crew breathes because of these plants, and the plants grow because of the crew's waste. It is a mutualistic dance that has to stay in perfect rhythm for generations. To make this ecosystem more resilient and efficient, you cannot rely on plants alone. This is where bioreactors come in. These are tanks where specific microorganisms, like algae or cyanobacteria, are cultivated. Algae are incredibly efficient at photosynthesis, potentially producing more oxygen and biomass per unit volume than higher plants. They can also be a source of food, either directly as a nutritional supplement or indirectly as a feed for other organisms. Some designs even incorporate small aquatic ecosystems. Fish like tilapia, which are hardy and efficient at converting feed into protein, could be raised in tanks. Their waste can fertilise the hydroponic systems, creating an integrated aquaponic loop. Insects, such as crickets or mealworms, are another possibility for protein. They require very little space and can feed on plant scraps. The idea is to create a web of life, a food chain with several nodes, so that if one element fails, a crop blight, a fish disease, the entire system does not collapse. This biodiversity is a safety mechanism. Managing this artificial biosphere is the single greatest ongoing challenge of the voyage. It is not a set-it-and-forget-it machine. It is a living, breathing and evolving entity. The ship's AI will be its constant gardener and doctor, monitoring millions of data points. pH levels in the hydroponic solutions, gas concentrations in the air, the health of individual plant batches via spectral analysis, the population dynamics in the bioreactors. It will make tiny adjustments to lighting schedules, nutrient pumps and atmospheric mix to keep everything in equilibrium. But the AI cannot do everything. Human farmers and ecologists will be essential roles aboard the ship. They will be the hands-on caregivers for this microworld, pruning plants, harvesting food, monitoring for signs of disease or pest infestation. Yes, pests. Even in a sealed environment, insects or fungal spores could hitch a ride from Earth or emerge from mutations. A single aphid outbreak or a mold could devastate a crop cycle. So part of the ecosystem design includes biological controls, perhaps introducing beneficial insects like ladybugs to control aphids, or using carefully curated fungi to combat other fungi. The use of broad-spectrum chemical pesticides would be incredibly dangerous in a closed loop, as they could poison the entire recycling system. The stability of this system over time is the profound unknown. On Earth, ecosystems have buffers, vast reservoirs and connections that allow them to absorb shocks. Our ship's ecosystem has no such luxury. Over decades, nutrient ratios might slowly drift in ways we did not predict. Trace elements vital for health but needed only in minute quantities might gradually become sequestered in unrecoverable forms. The microbial communities in the water and soil analogues might evolve in unexpected directions, perhaps losing their efficiency at breaking down waste. The human population itself will change the demands on the system. A population boom would stress food production, while a decline might lead to overgrowth of plants and oxygen imbalances. Therefore, the ecosystem must be not just stable, but adaptable. There will need to be seed banks and genetic libraries aboard, storing strains of plants, algae and microorganisms. If a crop variety becomes susceptible to a new disease, they can switch to a different resistant strain. If the algal bioreactors start underperforming, they can reintroduce a fresh culture from storage. The ecosystem's design must include redundancy and the capacity for renewal. Ultimately, this closed ecological system does more than just provide physical sustenance. Those vast agricultural modules, with their green growth under artificial sunlight, will become the psychological and social heart of the ship. They will be the parks, the gardens, the places of quiet and beauty, the smell of soil and growing plants, the sound of running water in the hydroponic channels, the sight of colour other than grey metal. These will be vital for mental health. The crew's daily connection to their food source, to the very cycle of life that keeps them alive, will forge a deep practical understanding of interdependence that no earthbound society truly has. They will not see food as something that comes from a store, but as the precious output of a system they must tend with their own hands. This constant, tangible feedback loop, where your waste becomes tomorrow's lettuce, and your breath becomes the oxygen for the tomatoes, might be the most profound cultural lesson of the entire journey. It teaches every single day that you're not just a passenger on the ship, you're an integral, active component of its metabolism. Your life is literally woven into the fabric of this tiny, travelling world. The success of the mission hinges not just on the engines firing at the right time, but on a child knowing how to pollinate a strawberry plant, on a farmer diagnosing a nitrogen deficiency in the wheat, and on an entire community understanding that the health of their own bodies is inextricably linked to the health of every green leaf and every microbe in the tanks. This closed ecosystem is the greatest test of our ability to mimic, sustain, and coexist with the delicate processes of life itself. That intricate, living web of the ship's ecosystem provides the calories, the oxygen, the water. But it cannot by itself provide the fundamental physical context that human bodies have evolved to expect for millions of years. The constant, gentle pull of gravity. You could have the most abundant garden imaginable, but if you try to live in microgravity for generations, your body will essentially dissolve. This is not an exaggeration. We know from astronauts that long-term exposure to weightlessness causes a brutal list of problems. Your bones, no longer needed to support your weight, leach calcium and become brittle, a condition akin to rapid osteoporosis. Your muscles, especially in the legs and back, atrophy from disuse. Your cardiovascular system becomes lazy. The heart does not have to work as hard to pump blood, leading to deconditioning and orthostatic intolerance. The inability to stand up without fainting upon return to gravity. Fluids shift upward, causing puffy faces, increased intracranial pressure, and long-term vision problems for many. The immune system weakens. This is all unacceptable for a journey where people are born, live, and die aboard. The solution is not a medical one. It is a brute force physics one. We have to fake gravity. The only practical way to do this for a vessel of this scale is through rotation, using centrifugal force to mimic gravitational pull. So our ship's habitat is not a long, slender tube pointed at the stars. It is most likely a massive cylinder or a donut-shaped ring spinning on its axis. If you stand on the inner surface of this spinning ring, the inertia of your body pushes you outward against the hull, and that push feels exactly like gravity. The faster the spin or the larger the radius, the stronger the artificial gravity. This simple principle, however, creates an astronomically complex engineering and biological challenge. First, the size. To make the gravity feel natural and to avoid the disorienting Coriolis effect, the rotating section needs to be huge. The Coriolis effect is what happens when you move in a rotating reference frame. If the ring is too small and spinning too fast, strange things happen. Drop an object and it will not fall straight down, it will curve noticeably. Turn your head quickly, and the fluid in your inner ear will slosh in unexpected ways, leading to debilitating nausea for many people. To get Earth-like gravity, let's call it 1D, with a Coriolis effect low enough that most people can adapt, you need a radius of several hundred meters, perhaps even a kilometer. This means the ship's habitat ring is a structure of staggering proportions, a hollow, rotating worldlet. The engineering to build this, to spin it up, to connect it to the non-rotating spine of the ship which holds the engines, telescopes and communication arrays, and to keep it balanced and true for centuries is arguably as big a challenge as the propulsion itself. But let's assume we build it. Now, we have a world where down is outward, toward the hull, and up is inward, toward the central axis. The entire interior landscape of the habitat is built on this curving inner surface. Buildings are constructed with their foundations pointing outward, so their floors are parallel to the hull. The sensation, from the perspective of someone inside a room, would be perfectly normal. You would feel your weight. You could pour a drink. A ball would arc in a parabola when thrown. The landscape itself would curve upward in both directions, eventually meeting overhead if the cylinder is long enough, creating a bizarre but eventually familiar vista of land and structures arching over you. This curvature defines everything about daily life and architecture. Roads might follow the curve, or they might be built in terrace steps. Water in rivers would flow downhill along the hull. The central axis, a long zero-G tunnel running the length of the cylinder, would be a unique transportation hub and recreational area, accessible by elevators or ladder tubes that run along the spoke structures connecting the hub to the rim. Getting from the rim to the axis, you would feel your weight gradually lessen, a strange and potentially dizzying experience. The creation of this gravity is the single most important health intervention on the ship, but it is not a cure-all. Even with a full 1G of artificial gravity, there will be residual health issues from living in a sealed, controlled environment with artificial day-night cycles, recycled air and a limited diet. Therefore, a rigorous health maintenance regime will be a mandatory part of life, as fundamental as eating or sleeping. Every individual will have a prescribed and monitored exercise schedule, likely involving resistive machines and centrifuges that are even more intense than the ship's baseline gravity, to specifically target bone density and muscle mass. Nutrition will be precisely calibrated, with supplements to ensure intake of every vitamin and mineral, especially vitamin D, since there is no real sunlight, and calcium. Medical monitoring will be constant and pervasive, with wearable sensors tracking heart rate, bone density scans at regular intervals, and blood tests analysing 1,000 different markers. Beyond the physical, the psychological health of the crew is utterly dependent on this artificial environment. The design of the habitat must actively combat claustrophobia and sensory deprivation. The feeling of openness is crucial. This is where the agricultural modules become doubly important. They are not just farms, they're vast open green spaces, parks and forests. The sightlines will be designed to feel long and unbroken. The lighting in the habitat will dynamically simulate a terrestrial day, with a bright sun that tracks along the central axis, even having a dimmer reddish period for dusk. The architecture will prioritise high ceilings, vertical spaces, and the use of mirrors or screen technology on the ceiling of the cylinder, the central axis, to project images of a sky, clouds, or even vistas of Earth or the destination planet, creating an illusion of infinite space. The social and practical organisation of life will also be shaped by gravity. Occupations will be divided between rimmers who work primarily in the 1G agricultural and manufacturing sectors on the hull, and spiders or axis monkeys who work in the microgravity industries and maintenance hubs at the centre. There might even be a slight status or cultural divide between these groups, based on their adaptation to different environments. Children will be born and grow up in this rotating world. Their bodies will develop under this constant 1G force, and it will be completely normal to them. They will think nothing of the fact that if they climb a tall structure, gravity very slightly decreases, or that throwing a ball long distance requires accounting for the Coriolis curve. To them, this curved world asterisk is asterisk flat. Their brains will have internalised its physics from infancy. The very concept of weightlessness might be something strange they experience on school trips to the central axis, a thrilling but unnatural break from their reality. The success of this artificial gravity environment is measured not just in the absence of medical reports on bone loss, but in the utterly mundane fact that people can live a physically normal life. They can run, they can dance, they can have children whose bodies develop strong skeletons, they can lift heavy objects without them floating away. This normalcy is the bedrock upon which a stable, multi-generational society can be built. It prevents the profound physical alienation that long-term microgravity induces. It allows for a division of labour that includes manual, physical work. It makes the ship feel less like a cramped vehicle and more like a place, a home with dirt underfoot and a sky above, even if that sky is a manufactured illusion. The rotation is the silent, constant heartbeat of this little world, the unseen force that gives shape to every action, every structure and every body within it. Without it, the mission is a biological impossibility. With it, the human body has a fighting chance to survive the centuries, arriving at a new star not as a collection of atrophied patients in need of rehabilitation, but as a strong, healthy population ready to step onto a new world and feel, at last, a gravity that is not their own creation. The artificial gravity from the ship's rotation ensures muscles and bones stay strong, giving the body a familiar physical context. But there is another, invisible environmental factor that doesn't care about gravity, doesn't care about your closed-loop ecosystem, and will kill you just as dead cosmic radiation. Out in the void between stars, the ship and its crew are naked to the universe. We are protected on Earth by a double shield, the planet's magnetic field which deflects charged particles, and the thick blanket of the atmosphere, which absorbs and breaks up what gets through. In interstellar space there is no such protection. The ship's hull, while strong against physical impact, is mostly transparent to this kind of danger. The crew will be under constant bombardment by two main types of radiation. First, there's the steady, relentless drizzle of galactic cosmic rays, or GCRs. These are not rays like light. They are atomic nuclei stripped of their electrons, accelerated to almost the speed of light by distant supernovae and other cosmic events. They are mostly protons, but some are heavier ions like iron nuclei. When one of these high-energy particles slams into a molecule in your body, it doesn't just nudge it, it creates a cascading shotgun blast of secondary particles, shattering DNA strands and damaging cells in a way that is very difficult for the body to repair. Then, there are solar particle events, sudden bursts of radiation from our own sun, or the destination star, during periods of intense solar activity like flares or coronal mass ejections. These are primarily protons as well, and while they are generally lower energy than GCRs, they're far more dense and intense. An unshielded crew during a major solar storm could receive a lethal dose in a matter of hours. The damage from this constant exposure is cumulative and insidious. It drastically increases the lifetime risk of cancer, it can cause cataracts, it can lead to degenerative tissue damage and cognitive issues over time. For a multi-generational mission, this is an existential threat. You cannot have a viable colony if everyone is dying of radiation-induced illnesses by middle age, or if the genetic damage leads to catastrophic birth defects over generations. So, you must build a shield. But how do you shield against something that can punch through meters of solid rock? The answer is a combination of mass, clever engineering, and medical science. The primary defense is passive shielding. You simply put enough stuff between the crew and the radiation to absorb and break up the incoming particles. However, enough stuff is the problem. Lead, a classic radiation blocker on Earth, is terrible for cosmic rays because when high-energy particles hit heavy nuclei like lead, they produce a shower of dangerous secondary neutrons. The best shielding materials are those with lots of hydrogen atoms. Water, plastics, polyethylene, even liquid methane. Hydrogen nuclei, single protons, are about the same size as the most common cosmic ray particles, so they're excellent at absorbing and dispersing the energy in a less harmful way. This is where the ship's architecture turns necessity into a design feature. The ship's water supply, which is massive, thousands and thousands of tons for drinking, hygiene, and the agricultural systems, becomes a primary radiation shield. The habitation modules, the areas where people live and work, will be located in the innermost part of the ship, surrounded by concentric rings of water tanks, fuel bunkers, food stores, and even the soil from the hydroponic farms. Think of it as living in the core of an onion, where every layer between you and the outer hull is a useful resource doing double duty as protection. The hull itself might have specialized shielding layers incorporating hydrogen-rich composites or boron-doped materials to neutron capture. This integrated approach is the only way to make the mass penalty manageable. You're not carrying pure shielding, you're intelligently arranging the mass you already need to carry. For the acute threat of solar particle events, the ship will have designated storm shelters. These are small, exceptionally well-shielded compartments, perhaps at the very centre of the ship, surrounded by the densest concentration of water and supplies. During a solar storm warning from the ship's sensors, the entire crew would retreat to these shelters for the duration of the event, which might last a day or two. It would be cramped and boring, but it would be the difference between life and death. Passive shielding alone, however, cannot stop all galactic cosmic rays, especially the high-energy ones. To completely block them, you would need walls of material many meters thick, which is impossible for a mobile ship. This is where the concept of active shielding comes in. Imagine recreating a tiny piece of Earth's magnetic field around your ship. The idea is to generate a powerful magnetic field that deflects charged particles before they even hit the hull, like an invisible force field. One concept is the superconducting magnet, a giant loop or series of coils running around the ship, cooled to near absolute zero. This would create a magnetic bubble, or magnetosphere, around the vessel. Another more exotic idea is the plasma shield, where you create a cloud of charged plasma around the ship that interacts with and disperses incoming radiation. The challenges for active shielding are enormous. The energy required to sustain such a field for centuries is a huge drain on the ship's power reactors. The superconducting magnets would be colossal, complex systems prone to quenching, suddenly losing superconductivity, which could be catastrophic. The engineering of creating a stable, uniform magnetic field large enough to envelop the entire habitat ring is a nightmare. And even if you succeed, magnetic fields only deflect charged particles. They're useless against neutral radiation like gamma rays or neutrons. So active shielding might be a supplemental system, perhaps used during predicted solar storms to enhance protection, but it is unlikely to be the sole solution. Given that perfect shielding is physically and practically impossible, the mission must embrace a philosophy of radiation risk management. This means you accept a certain calculated dose. The ship's AI, fed by a network of radiation sensors throughout the habitat, will constantly monitor the exposure of each crew member, likely via personal dosimeters. The goal is to keep everyone's lifetime dose as low as reasonably achievable. the Alara principle. This monitoring will inform rotation of duties. Someone who has to work frequently in less shielded areas, like the outer hull maintenance bays, will have their exposure tracked and limited. It will also dictate lifestyle. Perhaps time spent in the well-shielded agricultural core is encouraged, while recreational time in the more exposed central axis microgravity hub is rationed. The final line of defence is medical. Radioprotective drugs, compounds that can be taken before or after exposures to help mitigate cellular damage, might be part of the medical arsenal. Research into these is ongoing. More advanced concepts involve using nanotechnology or gene therapy to enhance the body's own DNA repair mechanisms. The ship's medical bay would be equipped to treat radiation sickness, and the genetic diversity of the population would be carefully managed to avoid concentrating any potential genetic susceptibilities to radiation damage. The children born on the ship will grow up with a fundamentally different relationship to radiation than we do. For them, the weekly dosimeter check will be as normal as a dental checkup is for us. They will understand that certain parts of their world are hotter than others. The concept of a solar storm drill heading to the storm shelter will be a routine part of life, a school exercise. This invisible, omnipresent threat will shape their culture, their routines, and their understanding of the universe's hostility in a way that earthbound humans can scarcely comprehend. The radiation shield, that composite of water tanks, fuel slush, polyethylene walls, and magnetic fields, is therefore the most silent and vital guardian on the ship. It does its job not with a roar, but with a constant, unyielding absorption. Its failure is not dramatic like an engine explosion. It is a creeping statistical increase in cancer rates a generation later. Its success is measured in the unremarkable fact that a population can live, thrive, and reproduce for centuries under a rain of atomic bullets. It is the technological manifestation of a promise to the future, that you will be allowed to grow old, not from the unseen knives of deep space, but from the natural passage of time within the fragile, precious bubble of your artificial world. Every litre of water, every tank of methane, every twist of superconducting wire is a testament to the lengths we must go to carve out a safe little pocket of normality in a universe that is, in its natural state, utterly lethal to life as we know it. The physical dangers of the voyage, radiation, microgravity, system failures, are monumental, but they are ultimately engineering problems. They have technical solutions, even if those solutions are wildly complex. The human problem, however, is a different category of challenge altogether. How do you design a society? How do you keep thousands of people and their descendants mentally stable, socially cohesive, and productively focused on a shared goal for longer than most civilizations last? This is not engineering. It is applied sociology, psychology, and politics on a century-long scale, with zero tolerance for catastrophic failure. The society of the ship is its own life support system, and if it fails, all the perfect engineering becomes a coffin. The foundation of this society is laid even before launch, with the selection of the initial colonists. This is not about picking the smartest scientists alone. You need a geneticist to ensure a healthy, diverse gene pool for thousands of people down the line. You need engineers, doctors, botanists, and technicians. But crucially, you also need teachers, artists, counsellors, and conflict mediators. You need people with profound psychological resilience, emotional stability, and a proven ability to handle stress and isolation in healthy ways. You need individuals who are flexible in their thinking, culturally adaptable, and who inherently value cooperation over competition in extreme environments. Compatibility is key. Not that everyone is the same, but that their differences are complementary rather than destructive. This initial seed group sets the cultural DNA, and their values will echo for generations. Once the ship is underway and the first generation of children is born in transit, the most critical system shifts from propulsion to education. The transfer of knowledge is the absolute lifeblood of the mission. The ship's vast AI archive contains all of human technical and cultural knowledge, but it is a static library. The living applied knowledge, the asterisk, how asterisk, and the why, must be passed from person to person. Every essential skill, from performing surgery to calibrating the fusion reactor's magnetic coils to diagnosing a blight in the wheat hydroponics, must be taught, practiced, and mastered anew by each generation. Apprenticeships will be the core of the educational model. A child might show an aptitude for systems engineering at a young age and be paired with a master engineer, learning not just from textbooks, but by shadowing, by doing maintenance, by hearing the stories of past minor failures and how they were solved. History is not an abstract subject. It is the story of their own world, the reasons for the mission, the biographies of the founders, and the logs of every crisis their grandparents faced. This education is about preserving continuity, ensuring that no vital piece of operational knowledge is ever lost to time. Alongside this, the society must have a system of governance. A direct democracy modelled on Earth nations might be too slow or too divisive for the constant, immediate decisions required for survival. The governance model will likely be a hybrid, a unique system forged for this specific context. There might be a meritocratic council of experts, the chief life support officer, the senior medical doctor, the head of agriculture, who make technical decisions within their domains. For broader social laws and resource allocation, there could be a representative body chosen from family units or residential modules. The ultimate authority might rest with a single elected captain or coordinator, but their power would be heavily checked by councils and charters. The constitution of the ship, likely drafted before launch, would be a sacred document, constantly studied and interpreted, defining rights and responsibilities in an environment where individual freedoms inevitably clash with the survival needs of the whole. A person's right to hoard water or to refuse mandatory crop rotation simply cannot exist. This leads to the economic model, which is fundamentally different from any Earth economy. There is no growth in the traditional sense. The ship's total mass of atoms is fixed. You cannot mine new iron, you must recycle the iron you have. You cannot print new money, it would be meaningless. The economy is a meticulous accounting of resources and labour. Wealth might be measured in contribution credits, not for buying essentials, which are allocated based on need, but for accessing luxuries, extra private space, more leisure time, preferred roles, or special artistic or recreational resources. The primary driver for work is not profit, but purpose and social obligation. Everyone, from the person who cleans the air filters to the person who plots navigational updates, understands that their job is literally keeping everyone alive. This direct line between labour and survival can be a powerful motivator and a source of profound satisfaction. Yet, despite all this careful design, conflict is inevitable. Close quarters, limited social options, the pressure of the mission, and generational drift will create friction. The society must have robust, non-violent conflict resolution mechanisms baked into its culture. Mediators, likely with psychological training, will be as essential as engineers. There will be rituals, perhaps communal gatherings or mandatory cooling-off periods to de-escalate disputes. The design of the habitat itself can help, providing ample private spaces for retreat and ample public, green spaces for community bonding. Art, music, storytelling, and religion will evolve in unique ways, reflecting the ship's environment and the journey. New festivals will emerge, perhaps marking the turning of the year based on the ship's own orbital clock, or a Founders' Day celebrating the launch. These cultural practices are not frivolous, they are the glue that holds identity together. They create a shared story, a sense of being the ship-born, a people distinct from Earth, united by a common destiny. This brings us to the greatest psychological challenge, the generational drift, or goal erosion problem. The original crew launched with a burning passion to reach a new world. Their children will grow up hearing those stories, but the ship is their entire universe. Their grandchildren might see Earth as a mythical place, and the destination planet as a vague promise so far in the future it lacks emotional weight. Why should they care about a mission started by their great-great-grandparents? Maintaining that long-term focus is a cultural engineering task of epic proportions. The mission's purpose must be woven into every aspect of life. The destination star's image might be projected in the central axis. Children might have planet-side classes where they'd learn the geology, climate, and potential biology of their new home as if it were a real geography lesson. Simulations of planetary life could be part of their recreation. The narrative must be powerful. We are the bridge. Our parents built the ship and our children will walk on the new world. We are the keepers of the flame in the long night. This sense of being a vital link in a chain of history is crucial. There is also the risk of stagnation. of a society turning inward and becoming overly rigid or losing its innovative spark. To counter this, the culture must value curiosity and controlled experimentation. Perhaps new art forms using recycled materials, or new musical instruments adapted to the ship's acoustics. Scientific inquiry cannot end. The crew must be encouraged to study their own closed ecosystem, improve recycling efficiencies, and even conduct experiments in preparation for planetary settlement. The society must be stable, but not static. It must be able to adapt to internal shifts in values and external, unforeseen challenges without fracturing. Ultimately, the social design recognizes that the ship is not just carrying humans, it is carrying a culture, a miniature civilization. Its success is measured not by the absence of arguments, but by the presence of a resilient, adaptive and purposeful community that can handle the immense psychological weight of their isolation. They must find meaning not just in the destination, but in the quality of the journey itself. They must build a world worth living in inside the metal walls, so that when their descendants finally open the airlocks on a new planet, they are not just surviving refugees, but a fully formed, functional society ready to plant its roots in alien soil. The society, therefore, is the most complex and delicate system on the ship. You cannot blueprint a human heart or a community's spirit with the same certainty as a radiation shield. It must be nurtured, attended to, and repaired constantly. Its fuel is hope, its currency is trust, and its output is the will to continue, a will that must remain unbroken for centuries. While human society navigates its own complexities, the physical world of the ship, the air, the water, the radiation levels, the reactor's heartbeat, requires a level of constant, unwavering attention far beyond human capacity. This is not a job for people. It is a job for a system that never sleeps, never gets distracted, and can think in a million data streams at once. The ship's artificial intelligence is not a character, not a conscious entity. It is the central nervous system of the entire vessel. It is the vast, silent intelligence that turns a collection of machinery and biology into a living, breathing, sustainable world. From the moment the engines ignite for the final time until the day the ship enters orbit around a new star, this network of AI systems will be the ultimate guardian, maintenance crew, archivist, and advisor. Its primary function is supervisorial control and integration. Think of it as the world's most sophisticated building management system, but one that manages not just temperature and lights, but the literal fundamentals of survival. It constantly receives data from billions of sensors, flow rates in every water pipe, gas composition in every corridor, pressure differentials across bulkheads, strain on structural members, temperature gradients across the reactor shielding, chlorophyll efficiency readings from every agricultural rack, radiation counts, and the vital signs of every crew member. Its first and most critical job is to keep all these parameters within safe boundaries. It does this not by waiting for an alarm, but by predictive modelling. It knows that if a pump bearing in water recycling Module 3 shows a specific vibrational signature, it has a 95% chance of failing within the next 500 hours. It then automatically generates a maintenance ticket, dispatches a notification to the human engineering team, and even coordinates with the logistics AI to ensure a replacement bearing is fabricated or retrieved from storage by the time the repair crew arrives. This is predictive maintenance on a civilization scale, preventing small failures from cascading into catastrophes. The AI is organised hierarchically. There is no single monolithic brain that could fail and doom everything. Instead, there are layered, specialised systems with deep redundancy. At the lowest level, dedicated sub-AIs run specific subsystems: the life support control system, the propulsion monitoring system, the agricultural management network, the structural integrity grid. Each of these is a master of its domain, capable of operating independently. They are overseen by higher-level integration AIs, whose job is to see the connections between domains. For example, the integration AI would understand that a planned power down of Fusion Reactor 2 for maintenance coincides with a peak agricultural lighting cycle, and it would either recommend a schedule change or automatically route power from backup capacitors to ensure the crops are not stressed. At the very top are a handful of overarching supervisory AIs which handle strategic mission planning, navigation and responses to complex multi-system emergencies. These high-level systems are the ones that would coordinate the ship's response to, say a major hull breach or a catastrophic crop blight, pulling resources from all departments and presenting the human command crew with a set of validated response options. The human crew is never out of the loop for critical decisions, especially those involving survival or ethical choices. The AI's role is to present data, simulations, and recommendations. A flashing alert might say, atmospheric contamination event in hydroponics sector 7, identified as fungal sporulation. Recommended action, seal sector, initiate UVC sterilization cycle, and purge with filtered air. Estimated crop loss 12%. Confirm action. A human, likely the chief botanist or life support officer, would then authorize or modify the plan. This human-AI partnership is crucial. The AI provides superhuman awareness and calculation speed. The human provides context, intuition, and ethical judgment. The crew must trust the AI implicitly, but they must also understand its limitations and be able to override it. This requires constant training and literacy. Every adult on the ship will have a basic understanding of how to query the AI for information, how to interpret its alerts, and crucially, how to perform key system functions manually if the AI guidance fails. They are not passengers, they are the ultimate backup system for the machine that keeps them alive. Beyond management, the AI is also the ship's memory. It contains the library, a complete archive of all human knowledge up to the point of departure, every technical manual, every historical record, every piece of music, every scientific paper, every work of literature and art. This is not just a static download. It is an active, curated database. When a child is learning about cellular biology, the AI can generate interactive lessons and simulations. When an engineer is trying to diagnose a strange harmonic in a coolant pump, the AI can cross-reference the symptom against every engineering log and maintenance report filed since the ship's construction, perhaps finding a similar incident 80 years prior and how it was resolved. The AI is also the daily interface for work. A farmer tending the wheat modules might wear augmented reality glasses that overlay data directly onto their field of view. Nitrogen levels for each plant, growth stage projections, automated alerts about discoloured leaves. A technician repairing a robotic arm in a high radiation area will be guided by the AI through every step via a heads-up display, with the AI highlighting specific bolts and warning of torque limits. This makes the AI the ultimate teacher and tool, deeply embedded in every profession. Then there are the physical agents of the AI, the robots. The ship will be filled with a menagerie of robotic helpers, from microscopic swarms that can flow through ductwork to inspect and repair microfractures, to humanoid robots capable of performing complex manual tasks in environments too dangerous for humans. There will be spider-like climbers for the exterior hull, rolling tenders for the agricultural aisles, and versatile general-purpose arms mounted on tracks in workshops and factories. These robots are the hands of the AI. When the predictive system flags that a solar panel on the ship's spine has degraded by 20%, it does not send a human on a dangerous spacewalk. It dispatches a hull crawler robot with the necessary tools and a new panel. The robot executes the repair under the remote supervision of a human engineer, who might be sitting safely inside, watching through the robot's cameras and feeling feedback through haptic gloves. This automation extends to manufacturing. The ship's factories, based primarily on advanced 3D printing and molecular recycling, will be heavily automated. Need a new hinge for a habitat door? The AI schedules the job, the recycling system provides the raw polymer, and a fabricator robot prints and assembles it. This closed-loop, automated manufacturing is what allows the ship to be self-sufficient for centuries, able to repair and even improve itself without any supply chain. The relationship between the crew and the AI will evolve over generations. The founders will see it as a supremely advanced tool they helped design. Their children will grow up with it as a constant omniscient presence, like a digital parent or guardian spirit of the ship. It will have a voice, a personality interface designed for clarity and calmness, especially in emergencies. It might even be woven into folklore and culture, the voice of the ship, the guardian. The danger, of course, is over-reliance or a loss of understanding. The society must vigilantly maintain its own technical knowledge. If a generation grows up simply trusting the AI to handle everything, and then a critical failure occurs that requires deep, fundamental understanding to fix, they could be helpless. Therefore, education constantly emphasizes the why behind the AI's actions. Students don't just learn that the AI mixes a certain nutrient solution, they learn the biochemistry of plant growth so they could, in theory, calculate the mix themselves. The AI is a partner, not a profit. The ethical boundaries are also critical. The AI is programmed with strict ethical protocols. It cannot, for example, lie to the crew or withhold vital information. Its decision-making in life or death scenarios is guided by pre-programmed ethical frameworks established before launch. Frameworks that the human crew can debate and potentially update. It is a system of immense power, and its control mechanisms must be transparent and accessible to the humans it serves. In the end, the AI and its robotic extensions are what make the human society aboard possible. They handle the crushing, repetitive, dangerous, and data-intensive burdens of survival, freeing the humans to be human, to govern, to create art, to fall in love, to teach their children, to find meaning. The ship is a cyborg entity, a biological, cultural component living in symbiosis with a digital, mechanical one. One cannot survive without the other. The AI ensures the air is breathable and the engines fire. The human spirit gives the journey a purpose worth enduring. This silent, ever-watchful network of intelligence is the true miracle of the ship, the ghost in the machine that keeps the flame of life burning through the long interstellar night. The AI system manages the flows and maintains the balances, but what exactly is it balancing? It is not money, not in any earthly sense. It is atoms. The economy of a generation ship is the most brutal and pure form of economics possible. The management of absolute scarcity within a completely closed system. There is no external input after launch. Every single atom of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, silicon, everything that the colony will ever have is already inside the hull. This transforms the entire concept of value and work. The economist Kenneth Boulding once described the future necessity of moving from a cowboy economy of limitless frontiers to a spaceship economy of careful recycling and maintenance. The generation ship is that spaceship economy made literal. The most valuable capital is not gold or data, it is mass. A kilogram of accessible carbon, a litre of pure water, a gram of rare trace elements like selenium or molybdenum. These are the true currencies, and they're non-negotiable. The ship's AI acts as the central banker and accountant for this atomic economy, tracking every gram through its cycles. It knows how much carbon is locked in the biomass of the forests, how much is in the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere, how much is in the body of a colonist, and how much is in the structure of a chair. The goal is near-perfect recycling. When a colonist dies, their body is not buried. It is respectfully and efficiently processed. Its water, carbon and nutrients are returned to the ecosystem. When a tool breaks, it is not discarded. It is fed into a molecular recycler that breaks it down to its base elements, sorts them, and feeds the raw material stocks for the 3D printers. This is not recycling as we know it. It is atomic stewardship. Nothing is thrown away because there is no away. This reality shapes every job and every social interaction. The primary occupation for most people will be the maintenance and expansion of this closed loop. There are farmers tending the agro-cycles, engineers monitoring and repairing the recycling machinery, technicians operating the fabricators, and chemists overseeing the atmospheric processes. Their work is not about producing surplus for market exchange. It is about preserving function and carefully, incrementally improving efficiency. A major technological breakthrough on the ship would not be a faster engine, but a new filtration membrane that recovers 1% more water from solid waste, or a genetically engineered yeast that produces a vital vitamin using less feedstock. Innovation is directed entirely towards doing more with less, because less is all you will ever have. So how do you motivate people in an economy with no growth, no possibility of becoming rich in a material sense? The traditional drivers of capitalism, acquisition and status through wealth, are meaningless when you cannot acquire anything new. Motivation must come from other sources. Primary is the sheer, undeniable purpose of survival. Everyone sees the direct results of their labour. The farmer sees the food on the table. The water recovery technician knows that their work literally refills the drinking tanks. This direct feedback loop between labour and life can provide a deep sense of meaning. Beyond that, society will likely use a system of contribution credits or social capital. These are not money. They cannot be used to buy essential resources, which are allocated by need via the central AI system. Instead, they function as a form of reputation and access to non-essential goods and privileges. Earning credits might come from taking on undesirable but necessary shifts, excelling in one's primary duty, contributing innovative ideas that improve efficiency, or performing exceptional community service. These credits could then be spent on things like priority for larger or better located private quarters, extra time in recreational facilities like virtual reality suites or specialised gyms, first access to new cultural creations like a musical performance or a story, or the ability to request a specific desirable work assignment or apprenticeship for one's child. This system creates a flexible social lubricant and a way to recognise and reward contribution without violating the fundamental law of fixed resources. It also helps manage disputes over scarce luxuries without resorting to a black market or force. Trade between individuals will still exist, but it will be in services, favours and crafted items. A musician might compose a personalised song for a couple's anniversary in exchange for the mechanic's spouse performing a tune-up on their instrument fabricator. A chef might create a special meal for a family using their own ingredient rations in exchange for tutoring their child in mathematics. This person-to-person economy of skills and arts will thrive because it deals in the infinite resource of human creativity, not the finite stock of atoms. The concept of property undergoes a radical shift as well. No one can truly own a chunk of raw material as it belongs to the collective survival pool. You might have stewardship of tools for your job, or possession of personal items you've made or been allocated. But the idea of hoarding is not just antisocial, it is suicidal. If someone secretly stockpiled water, they would be stealing from the life support system and endangering everyone. Therefore, the culture would have to instill a powerful ethic of transparency and communal trust, backed by the AI's sensor network, which would likely detect such abnormal stockpiling anyway. The economic structure also dictates social planning. The population size is not a random variable, it is a carefully managed parameter. The AI and the governing council will have a target carrying capacity based on the sustainable output of the agricultural systems and the life support loops. Family planning might be influenced by this, not through draconian mandates necessarily, but through strong social guidance and the allocation of living space. Having a child might require applying for an allocation package of extra water, carbon, and nutrient rations from the central bank, which would only be granted if the systems can support it. This sounds cold, but it is the arithmetic of survival. The economy is also about time. With automation handling most brute force labour, humans will likely work fewer hours per week on essential maintenance than we do today on Earth. This creates a surplus of time, the other great resource. How this time is used will define the culture. It could be filled with education, art, scientific research, complex games and social interaction. The leisure economy could be incredibly rich. The ultimate purpose of this entire economic model is stability, not growth. Its success is measured by the quiet, uneventful continuity of the recycling percentages. A successful economic quarter is not a rising stock index. It is a report showing that water recovery held steady at 99.94%, that the phosphorus loop is in balance, and that the population's nutritional markers are all green. It is profoundly boring, and that is the point. Crisis comes when the loops fall out of balance. If a crack in a reactor cooling line causes a loss of 2 tons of water into space, that is not just an engineering problem, it is an economic catastrophe. That water is gone forever. The entire ship's budget must be recalculated. Rations might be tightened. Non-essential uses of water, like certain decorative fountains or extra shower time, might be suspended indefinitely. The society must absorb this shock without panic because they understand the underlying accounts. This constant intimate awareness of limits fosters a mindset that is alien to consumer Earth. A child learns that a broken toy is not just a sadness, it is a lesson in the conservation of polymers. A couple planning a meal thinks about the nutrient cycles that produce the ingredients. This pervasive ecological literacy is the true wealth of the ship's society. They understand their place in the material flow with a clarity no earthbound human ever achieves, because on Earth, the consequences of waste are diluted and distant. On the ship, they're immediate and personal. The closed-loop economy, therefore, is the practical manifestation of the ship's ethos. It is the daily lived experience of interdependence and absolute limit. It forges a citizenry that is prudent, innovative within constraints, and deeply responsible. They are the careful gardeners of a single tiny island of matter in an ocean of nothingness, and their economic principles are the rules they must follow to keep their island green and alive. They are practicing in microcosm the only kind of economics that has any long-term future for any civilization, the economics of a world where everything is precious and nothing comes for free. The closed-loop economy teaches the society to rely entirely on itself, to account for every atom within its own world. But this inward focus is not just a choice, it is a physical inevitability enforced by the most unbreakable law in the universe, the speed of light. As the ship accelerates away from Earth, the time lag in communications grows from minutes to hours to days and eventually to years. This is not a technical limitation to be solved with a better antenna. It is a fundamental fact of physics. That growing silence, that stretching thread of contact, will force the most profound psychological and operational shift in the entire mission. The transition from a guided expedition to a fully autonomous civilization. In the beginning, there will be regular contact. During the acceleration phase out of the solar system, messages will take hours or maybe a few days to reach Earth, and the same to get a reply. Mission Control can offer advice, send software updates, and provide a comforting link to home. But with each passing year, the delay increases. After a decade, the round-trip communication time might be 20 years. You send a question as a young adult and you receive an answer when you are middle-aged. After 50 years, the delay might be a century. The conversation becomes meaningless. You're not having a dialogue. You're sending telegrams into a well and generations later, maybe hearing a faint echo. This changes the very nature of the relationship. The ship can no longer ask Earth for help in a crisis. By the time Earth even hears about the crisis, it will be ancient history back on the ship, either long solved or having doomed them. Therefore, the ship must be designed from the start to be its own command, its own mission control. Every possible contingency, every imaginable failure mode must have protocols and decision trees stored in the AI and taught to the crew. They must have the tools, the knowledge, and the legal moral authority to make any decision necessary for survival, up to and including altering the mission profile or even choosing a different destination star if their original target proves inhospitable. This absolute autonomy is terrifying and liberating. It means the chain of command ends on the bridge of the ship. There is no higher appeal, no outside authority. The social and governmental structures we discussed earlier are not just for managing daily life. They are the sovereign government of a travelling nation-state. Their constitution is the highest law they will ever know. This reality will fundamentally alter the crew's psychology, especially over generations. The first generation will feel the loss acutely. They will remember real-time conversations, the voices of loved ones left behind. They might experience a kind of protracted grief as the delays stretch, turning meaningful conversation into a ritual of sending monologues into the void. They are the last to truly feel like an extension of humanity. Their children, the first shipborne generation, will have a different perspective. Earth will be a story, a place in history lessons and family lore. Communicating with it will be a formal ceremonial act like sending a message in a bottle. They will feel a connection, but it will be abstract, like our connection to ancient Rome. By the third or fourth generation, Earth will be mythology. The delay will exceed the longest living person's memory. The message to Earth ritual might still exist, but it will be akin to praying to ancestors or sending reports to an absent semi-divine creator. Their identity will be fully ship. Their concerns, their politics, and their art will all be about the ship and the destination ahead. The umbilical cord is not cut. It is stretched so thin by distance that it ceases to function as a lifeline and becomes a historical curiosity. This isolation is necessary for the final stage of the mission, becoming a truly independent colony. If they arrived at the new star still psychologically and operationally dependent on Earth, they would be unfit for the challenge of building a new world from scratch. The centuries of isolation are a brutal but effective training ground for sovereignty. The technical side of communication is its own immense challenge. To even maintain a one-way data trickle across light years requires a phenomenal system. The ship will need a massive, high-gain communication antenna, likely housed in the non-rotating spine to keep it steadily aimed at Earth. The power required to beam a signal that remains detectable across such distances is enormous. The data rate will be excruciatingly slow, probably just kilobits per second. You're not streaming video, you're sending compressed text logs, scientific data summaries, and maybe the most precious cultural updates, a selection of new music, writings, and artwork created aboard. It is a cultural time capsule sent backward. Incoming messages from Earth will be the same. A trickle of data containing humanity's news, scientific discoveries from centuries after they left, and perhaps personal messages for the descendants of the original crew, now so old they are genealogical records rather than emotional missives. This link, tenuous as it is, will be maintained not for practical guidance but for two profound reasons. First, for science. The ship is a unique deep space observatory. Its data on the interstellar medium, cosmic ray fluxes, and the view of the galaxy from a radically different location is priceless for scientists on Earth. Second, for legacy. It is a statement that the two branches of humanity are still connected, however faintly. It affirms that the mission was not an abandonment, but a seeding. The knowledge that their journey is being watched, that their story is being received, might provide a subtle, foundational sense of purpose for the shipborne generations. They are not alone in the dark. They are performers in a play for an audience they will never see, but whose existence gives their struggle a cosmic meaning. Paradoxically, the communication delay also forces cultural innovation. With no real-time feedback from Earth, the ship's culture must evolve on its own. New slang, new artistic movements, new social norms will develop without any influence from Earth's trends. A new language might even emerge, blending the tongues of the founders. Their stories will be about their own heroes and crises, not Earth's. This cultural divergence is the birth of a new branch of human civilization. The final, chilling milestone comes when the round-trip delay exceeds the ship's total remaining travel time. At that point, you could send a message to Earth saying, "We have arrived safely," and before the confirmation could possibly come back, you would already have landed on the planet and begun building. From that moment on, communication is purely an archival broadcast. You're speaking into the past, for the record. The ship's society must come to terms with this profound loneliness. It will shape their philosophy, their spirituality, and their collective character. They will either see themselves as orphans, adrift and abandoned, or as pioneers, the vanguard of humanity, carrying the flame forward into the night. Cultivating the latter view is a central task of their education and culture. They are not castaways, they are seeds. The silence is not emptiness. It is the space in which they must grow their own future. The agonizing delay, therefore, is not just a technical hurdle, it is the furnace in which their independence is forged. It is the great filter for their psychology. It teaches the hardest lesson of all, that in the end, beyond all protocols and preparations, they have only each other. That realization, painful as it is the final ingredient needed to transform a shipload of passengers into a people, ready to cease being travellers and become founders. The profound isolation and self-reliance necessitated by the communication delay forces the ship's society to look inward for solutions, not just socially, but biologically. The closed-loop ecosystem is a masterpiece of environmental engineering, but it is built with the biology we brought from Earth. What if we could improve that biology? What if we could engineer not just the ship, but the very life within it to be better suited for the journey? This is the realm of synthetic biology, moving beyond selection and cultivation into active redesign. It is a powerful and ethically fraught toolkit that could become essential for survival. The most immediate and least controversial application is in the agricultural systems. The plants grown aboard are not the same as those on Earth. They are optimized variants. Using genetic editing tools, scientists can design crops for maximum efficiency in the ship's specific conditions. This could mean altering photosynthesis pathways to make better use of the specific LED light spectra, creating dwarf root structures perfect for hydroponic trays, or boosting nutritional content per gram of biomass. Crops could be engineered for inherent resistance to the fungal or bacterial pests most likely to emerge in the closed environment, reducing the need for risky chemical treatments. They could be designed to produce higher yields with less water vapor transpiration, easing the load on the water recovery systems. This is not speculative. We are doing simpler versions of this on Earth today. On the ship, it becomes a continuous, careful process of incremental optimization, a quiet arms race against entropy and blight. Beyond plants, microorganisms become microscopic factories. Engineered bacteria or algae in bioreactors could be tasked with hyper-efficient waste processing, breaking down complex hydrocarbons or toxic compounds that the standard systems struggle with. Other strains could be designed to produce vital pharmaceuticals, vitamins, or specialty chemicals on demand from raw materials available in the recycling stream. Imagine a vat of custom yeast that, when fed with a certain waste slurry, produces a specific antibiotic that the ship's pharmacy has run out of. This turns biology into a just-in-time manufacturing platform, drastically reducing the need to carry vast physical stockpiles of every possible medicine for centuries. It also adds a layer of resilience. The knowledge to grow a therapy is more compact and durable than the therapy itself. Then we come to the most complex and controversial frontier, human adaptation. The ship's environment, despite all efforts, is not Earth. Radiation levels, though managed, are higher. The diet, though balanced, is limited and repetitive. The gene pool is limited to a few thousand founder genomes. Could synthetic biology offer solutions here? One area is radiation resistance. Certain Earth organisms, like the famously hardy tardigrade or some bacteria, possess genes that grant incredible resistance to radiation. Research might one day allow the safe and ethical introduction of analogous DNA repair mechanisms into human cells, not for the founders, but for embryos conceived aboard. This would be a monumental decision, altering the human genome for a specific environmental challenge. It raises immediate questions. What are the long-term side effects over 15 generations? Does this make them less fit for life on a planetary surface later? Another potential use is metabolic optimization. Genes could be tweaked to optimize the processing of the ship's specific protein sources, or to reduce the propensity for certain vitamin deficiencies. More speculatively, one could consider edits to reduce the psychological susceptibility to chronic stress or claustrophobia, though the genetics of such complex traits are poorly understood and tinkering would be wildly dangerous. The primary, and perhaps most defensible, use of human genetic technology would be in preventative medicine. Using advanced pre-implantation genetic screening and selection, couples could ensure their children do not inherit known harmful genetic mutations that lurk in the founder population. This is already done today. Going a step further, germline editing could correct those mutations entirely, not just in one child, but in all their descendants, slowly raising the baseline genetic health of the entire population over generations. This is not about creating enhanced humans, but about preventing known concrete suffering in an environment where medical resources are finite and certain conditions could be catastrophic. The ethical boundaries are the central drama of this toolset. The ship's culture would need to establish a powerful, transparent, and consensual framework for any such interventions. There would likely be strict divisions between therapy and enhancement. Correcting a gene that causes a fatal heart condition is therapy. Adding a gene for hypothetical radiation resistance is enhancement, and the line is blurry. Who decides? Council of ethicists, doctors and representatives? Is it a personal choice for parents, or a collective one for the gene pool? The debate would echo through the ship's generations. Furthermore, the technology itself is a risk. Genetic engineering tools like CRISPR are powerful but can have off-target effects. An error in a human germline edit would echo forever in the population. The tools and knowledge would need to be preserved with religious care, and the decision to use them would be made with profound gravity. There is also the philosophical weight of creating a new branch of humanity, adapted to starship life. Would they still be human in the same way? They would likely see themselves as human, just optimized for their environment, much as we see ourselves as the same species as our ancestors despite millennia of adaptation. But the conscious, deliberate nature of the change adds a different dimension. Ultimately, synthetic biology on the ship is a logical extension of the entire mission's ethos, using intelligence and technology to adapt life to a profoundly unnatural environment. The ship itself is a prosthetic for biology, a bubble of Earth conditions. Synthetic biology asks if we can make the biology itself fit the bubble better, reducing the strain on the prosthetic systems. It is a technology of integration, of blurring the line between the born and the built. The ship would carry not just a frozen archive of Earth's genetics, but a living, evolving toolkit to refine and adapt those genetics. This capability could be the key to surviving unforeseen biological challenges, like a pandemic caused by a ship-evolved pathogen, or to thriving on a destination planet with a subtly toxic chemistry. It offers a way to turn the static cargo of a genetic legacy into an active, responsive process. The generations born aboard would likely view this not as a scary transgression, but as a normal part of their stewardship. Tending the genetic health of their crops, their microbes, and themselves would be seen as another vital system to maintain, like the oxygen recyclers or the radiation shields. The debates would be heated, the protocols strict, but the potential to gently guide their own evolution would be a recognised and awesome responsibility. It represents the final stage of taking control of their destiny, not just politically and socially, but biologically. They are not just passengers on a journey shaped by their ancestors' design. They become the architects of the very life that will complete it. The potential to adapt biology hints at a deeper truth. The human mind itself must be carefully tended, and this goes far beyond genetics. The architecture and design of the living spaces are not just about efficiency. They're a psychological life support system as critical as the oxygen generators. In a world where every horizon is a curving wall of metal, where there is no weather, no seasons, and no uninhabited wilderness, the mind can easily succumb to a profound malaise, a ship-bound neurosis of monotony and sensory deprivation. Preventing this is an active, deliberate design challenge. It begins with the most fundamental rhythm: light. The ship cannot have a 24-hour day-night cycle imposed by a rotating planet, so it must create one. The lighting throughout the habitat will be dynamically programmed to simulate a natural terrestrial day. In the morning, the light along the central axis will warm from a deep blue to a bright neutral white, peaking at noon before slowly fading through amber and into a dim, starry twilight. This cycle regulates circadian rhythms, maintaining sleep-wake cycles, hormone production, and overall mental health. It creates the passage of time, the reliable rhythm of days that structures human life. Without it, the endless sameness of artificial light would lead to insomnia, depression, and social dysfunction. But light alone is not enough. The very geometry of the world is strange. Standing on the inner surface of a rotating cylinder, the ground curves upward in both directions. In a large enough cylinder, this curvature is gentle, but it is always present. The architecture must work with this, not against it. Buildings are designed to follow the curve, with floors terraced or stepped. Long, straight streets are impossible. Instead, pathways will meander, following the natural contour or climbing gently via ramps and stairs to different levels of the inner surface, which are really just rings further along the curve. To combat the feeling of being inside a tube, designers will use visual tricks. The sky, the central axis, might be covered with massive high-resolution display panels. These could show a rendered moving image of an Earth-like sky with clouds, or a breathtaking vista of the destination planet's landscape, or even a star field that slowly rotates as the ship turns. The goal is to create an illusion of depth and infinity, to give the eye a place to rest that feels far away. Mirrors strategically placed on the axis could reflect the habitat below, creating a confusing but expansive sense of a world stretching on forever. The interior landscaping is where this design becomes vital. The agricultural modules are not hidden away. They're integrated into the living spaces. Vast parklands are not a luxury, they're a public health requirement. These are areas where food plants are grown in aesthetically pleasing arrangements, alongside non-edible plants chosen for their scent, colour and texture. There will be walking paths through hydroponic orchards, sitting areas beside flowing water channels that are part of the irrigation system, and quiet groves where the only sound is the hum of life support and the rustle of leaves. The smell of soil and greenery is a powerful antidote to the sterile scent of filtered air and metal. These spaces provide a sensory connection to a living, growing world, however managed. They are places for solitude, contemplation and social gathering. They are the ship's lungs in a psychological sense, a space to breathe freely. Privacy is another crucial design element. In a densely populated, closed community, the ability to be alone is precious. Personal quarters, while compact, must be designed to feel like sanctuaries. Soundproofing is important. Layouts might include transformable furniture and partitions, allowing individuals to customize their small space. Beyond the private room, there need to be nooks, small reading capsules, and individual gardens where a person can go to be unseen and unheard for a few hours. This is not antisocial. it is a pressure valve for social friction. Conversely, there must be excellent communal spaces that encourage positive interaction. Large plazas, theatres, workshops, gyms and restaurants. The flow between private, small group and large communal spaces must be intuitive and offer choice. The materials used throughout the habitat are also chosen for psychological effect. Metals and plastics are balanced with warm woods, perhaps from fast-growing bamboo in the agroforests, textiles and natural stone composites. Surfaces are varied to the touch. Acoustics are engineered to avoid the echoey feel of a cavern or the dead silence of a vacuum. A soft background ambient sound of water, wind chimes, or distant activity might even be introduced. The overall aesthetic goal is to avoid the feeling of being in a machine, and instead create the feeling of being in a place that has grown organically, a village that just happens to be inside a spacecraft. This design must also be modular and adaptable over generations. The needs and tastes of the grandchildren will not be the same as the founders. Walls might be movable, allowing neighbourhoods to be reconfigured. Old communal halls can be repurposed. The ship's AI, with its understanding of population density and social flow, could even suggest layout changes to improve community cohesion or efficiency. This ability for the people to reshape their own environment, to leave their mark on the very structure of their world, is empowering. It fights the feeling of being trapped in a frozen, immutable cage. Finally, art and personal expression are baked into the architecture. Walls are not blank. They're surfaces for murals, digital displays for community art, or living walls of moss and vine. The history of the journey is visualized in public spaces, a timeline along a major corridor, a stellar map that updates with the ship's progress, memorials for those who have died. Culture becomes physical. Over decades, the ship will develop its own aesthetic, a blend of the founders' earthly cultures and the unique experience of living in a rotating cylinder. New art forms might emerge that play with the curvature, with the artificial light cycles, or with the microgravity at the axis. The design of the habitat, therefore, is an ongoing conversation between the need for order and the need for human expression. It recognizes that a healthy society cannot exist in a purely utilitarian box. The mind needs beauty, variety, surprise, and a sense of ownership. A well-designed habitat does not just keep people alive, it gives them a reason to want to be alive, to engage with their community, and to look forward to the future. It turns a vessel into a home, and a population into a people with a shared attachment to their unique, crafted world. The success of the interstellar mission may well depend as much on the skill of the architects and psychologists who designed the feeling of a town square as on the engineers who designed the fusion reactor. For if the human spirit withers in the long night, the ship will arrive at its destination with nothing but skeletons at the helm. For generations, the ship has been a self-contained universe, its rhythms internal, its concerns focused on maintenance and culture within the curved walls. The destination has been a point of light in a lecture, a story for children. But as the voyage enters its final century, that point of light begins to grow. It becomes a disk, then a system of disks. The abstract future becomes an imminent, terrifying reality. This triggers the most critical, non-negotiable and dangerous phase of the entire mission since launch, the deceleration and arrival sequence. After centuries of silent coasting, the ship must now turn itself around and fire its primary engines at full power for just as long as it accelerated at the beginning, to kill its tremendous velocity. The sleeping giant must awaken. The first challenge is the reactivation of systems that have been dormant or in low-power maintenance mode for hundreds of years. The propulsion spine, a kilometres-long structure that has been cold and silent since the founders died, must be brought back online. This is not a simple flip of a switch. Teams of engineers, working from manuals preserved and studied for this exact moment, will begin the painstaking process of checking every conduit, every magnetic coil, every fuel line that feeds the fusion or antimatter reactors. They are performing archaeology on their own world, reviving a godlike machine built by their ancestors. The fuel reserves, carefully husbanded for this moment, must be thawed and brought to the correct state. This period is one of intense, focused anxiety. A single fault in a system no living person has ever seen operate at full power could be catastrophic. The ship's AI, which has been simulating the sequence for centuries, will guide them, but human hands and judgment will be final, assuming the propulsion system lights successfully. the ship begins the long burn to slow down. The orientation is now reversed. The engines face forward into the direction of travel, acting as a colossal brake. For the crew, this means the artificial gravity from rotation is now combined with the deceleration thrust. The feeling of down might shift subtly, pulling them slightly toward the engines at the stern. The burn will last for years, maybe decades. Life goes on, but under the shadow of a final exam. Then, as the ship slows to a mere fraction of light speed, it enters the gravitational sway of the destination star. Now orbital mechanics becomes the master. The navigation AI, using telescopes that have been studying this system for decades, plots a precise course. The goal is to use the star's gravity to help capture the ship. But too close a approach and they will be vaporized. Too distant, and they will slingshot back out into the void. This is a delicate dance performed with a mountain moving at thousands of kilometers per second. If the target planet has an atmosphere, the engineers might attempt a maneuver called aerobraking. This involves skimming the upper layers of the atmosphere, using friction to slow the ship down even more, saving precious fuel. It is an incredibly risky procedure. The ship's heat shield, a feature unused since perhaps a gravity assist maneuver around Jupiter centuries prior, must be flawless. A single miscalculation in the angle of approach could cause them to burn up or bounce off into a useless orbit. The entire crew would be on edge during these first passes, watching temperature readings on the hull climb to terrifying levels before slowly falling as they emerge back into the vacuum. Once the ship is successfully captured into a stable orbit around the target planet, a new wave of operations begins. The planet is no longer an image, it is a world filling their viewports, with clouds, continents and oceans. Intensive remote sensing scans every detail, verifying pre-launch data and searching for ideal landing sites. Now, the ship transitions from a vessel to a mothership. Docked along its spine or within its bays are the landing craft. These are not the tiny capsules of Apollo. They are substantial, prefabricated habitat modules with their own small engines and heat shields. Some may carry autonomous constructor robots and greenhouses. The first wave of pioneers will board these landers. These individuals are the culmination of the mission. They have trained their whole lives in simulations for this moment. They are likely volunteers from the youngest, most physically resilient generation, chosen for skills in geology, ecology, construction and medicine. The launch of the landers is another critical event. They must detach, navigate their own deceleration and entry, and touch down safely on an alien world. Back in orbit, the main ship watches, a nervous parent. The success of these first landings is the first true step onto the new world. Once a foothold is established, the ship's role shifts again. It becomes a space station, a logistics hub, and a resource depot. For years or decades, it will ferry people and materials down to the surface using shuttles. But perhaps its final, greatest contribution is its own body. The ship, having completed its primary mission of delivery, may be deconstructed. Its massive hull plates can be cut apart and sent down to the planet to become the frames for permanent structures. Its water tanks can be drained to fill reservoirs. The rich soil from its agricultural sectors can be used to seed the first farms. Even the reactor can become the nucleus of the colony's power grid. The act of taking apart their ancestral home piece by piece to build the new world would be a powerful symbolic and practical act. It represents the end of the journey and the beginning of the colony. Every bolt and beam finds a new purpose. This final phase is the ultimate test of the society they built. The calm, cooperative, technically proficient culture nurtured over centuries must now execute a series of incredibly complex high-stakes operations with perfect coordination. The knowledge preserved through generations must be flawlessly applied. The psychological readiness to leave the only home anyone has ever known and step onto a wild planet is immense. The shipborne generations must confront open skies, weather, and gravity that is not their own for the first time. It will be terrifying and exhilarating. The ship, having protected them from the void for so long, now releases them into a new kind of vulnerability. The deceleration and arrival sequence is therefore the bookend to the launch. It is the moment where potential energy, the kinetic energy of the voyage and the stored cultural energy of the society, is finally converted into action. It is the proof of concept for the entire multi-generational gamble. The success of this phase validates every sacrifice, every careful recycling of water, every lesson taught in a classroom under artificial light. It turns the ship from a journey into a legend, and its people from crew into founders. The long night is over. A new day, under a new sun, begins. The successful arrival and the frantic activity of establishing a planetary foothold would be impossible without a population that arrived healthy. This final push depends entirely on the medical system that sustained them during the centuries of transit, a system that had to function not just as a clinic, but as a public health institution for an entire evolving civilization in a bottle. The medicine practiced aboard a generation ship is a unique discipline, blending extreme preventative care, crisis management, and long-term genetic stewardship. It begins with the fundamental constraint of a closed population. The genetic diversity of a few thousand founders is limited. Over generations, without new genetic input, the risk of recessive hereditary disorders expressing themselves increases through inbreeding. To combat this, the ship carries a frozen treasure more valuable than any metal, a genetic archive. This is not just the digital DNA sequences of Earth's species, but physical banks of cryogenically preserved sperm and eggs, and likely embryonic stem cells from a donor pool much larger and more diverse than the founding crew. This archive is carefully managed. When individuals wish to have children, they can choose to use their own genetic material, but the AI will calculate the genetic distance and compatibility, flagging potential high-risk combinations for recessive traits. They might be strongly encouraged, or in some strict social models required, to incorporate genetic material from the archive to maintain heterozygosity. This isn't eugenics in a selective sense, it is genetic conservation, akin to managing an endangered species gene pool. The goal is to prevent a catastrophic concentration of harmful mutations, ensuring the population remains robust enough for the physical challenges of planetary settlement. Day-to-day medicine relies heavily on the ship's AI and automation. Every crew member is continuously monitored by wearable biosensors, tracking heart rate, sleep quality, blood oxygen, and a host of other metrics. This data streams to the medical AI, which looks for subtle anomalies, a slight persistent inflammation marker, a change in microbiome diversity long before symptoms appear. This allows for preemptive intervention, perhaps a change in diet or prescribed probiotics, to head off illness. The medical bay itself is a compact marvel of robotics and telemedicine. Advanced imaging scanners, compact but powerful, can diagnose everything from a bone fracture to a tumour. Surgical procedures are performed with robotic assistance, guided by surgeons who have trained in VR simulations of every conceivable operation. The AI can overlay precise anatomical guides drawn from the patient's own scans onto the surgeon's view. For incredibly complex or dangerous procedures, surgery might be performed entirely by a robot under a human surgeon's supervision. The knowledge base for all this is the archived medical knowledge of Earth, but it is not static. The ship's doctors add to it constantly, documenting every case, every treatment outcome, every strange allergic reaction to the ship's unique diet. This living medical record spanning centuries is an invaluable resource for spotting long-term health trends in the population. One of the greatest challenges is the emergence of novel pathologies. In the ship's unique environment, new strains of bacteria or viruses could evolve, or known ones could behave differently. A harmless skin microbe from Earth might, over centuries in the closed system, adapt into something more problematic. The medical team must be ready to diagnose and treat illnesses for which there is no earthly reference. Their tools include rapid gene sequencers to identify new pathogens and flexible fabrication systems to produce targeted drugs or therapies. The concept of quarantine is paramount. An outbreak in a closed system could be devastating. The ship's design includes isolation wards with independent life support, and protocols for containment are drilled regularly. Beyond infectious disease, there are the chronic effects of the environment. Despite shielding, the higher background radiation may lead to slightly elevated cancer rates. The medical system must have superb oncology capabilities, from detection to treatment using radiation therapy, chemotherapy synthesized on board, or immunotherapy techniques. The limited diet, though supplemented, might still lead to subtle nutritional deficiencies over generations, requiring careful monitoring and adjustment of food formulations. Then there is the management of aging and life cycles. In a population with a fixed carrying capacity, unconstrained growth is a path to starvation. Therefore, the society likely has a conscious population policy. This isn't necessarily a one-child rule, but a coordinated, socially accepted planning system. Couples apply to have children, and permissions are granted based on the ship's current ecological capacity and genetic goals. This extends to end-of-life care as well. With limited resources, extremely aggressive life-extending treatments for the terminally ill might be deemed an unsustainable drain. The medical ethic, forged in the harsh light of survival calculus, would likely emphasize quality of life and a dignified conclusion, allowing resources to be directed towards the young and those maintaining the ship's functions. This is a brutal form of triage enacted on a civilizational scale, and its social acceptance would be a cornerstone of their culture. The medical professionals are therefore not just doctors, they are biostatisticians, ethicists, and genetic counsellors. They work in concert with the governing council and the AI to manage the population's health as a whole system. A health crisis is never just a personal tragedy, it is a systems engineering problem. The arrival at the destination planet introduces a whole new suite of medical challenges known as planetary medicine. The crew, adapted to the clean, controlled environment of the ship, now faces a wild biosphere. There will be alien allergens, potential pathogens in the soil and water, and novel environmental toxins. The first order of business is rigorous planetary quarantine and testing. Initial habitats are sealed, and all materials brought from the surface are sterilised. Crew members are scanned and monitored after every extravehicular activity. The medical team works with exobiologists to analyse samples, looking for any sign of harmful cross-reactivity. The goal is to prevent a scenario where an alien microbe wipes out the colony, or where human microbes devastate a native ecosystem. Finally, the medicine of the ship must transform into the medicine of a growing planetary colony. A compact, high-tech medical bay becomes the nucleus of a larger hospital. Knowledge shifts from maintaining a stable bubble to tackling trauma, environmental injuries, and the health issues of a population living under a new gravity and weather. The genetic archive is used not just for human diversity, but to begin introducing earth crops and animals into the new world, with careful genetic screening. The ship's medical legacy is one of profound responsibility. It upheld the principle that the health of the individual and the health of the collective are inseparable. It made agonizing choices in the dark to ensure a healthy population could finally step into the light of a new sun. It was a system built not for profit, not for prestige, but for the simple, monumental task of delivering life, intact and viable, across the ocean of stars. The doctors who treated ear infections in children and the councils that debated genetic policy were, in their way, as vital as the pilots who fired the braking engines. They tended the flame of biology itself, ensuring it burned bright enough to kindle of the new world. The meticulous medical planning ensures the population arrives biologically viable, but biology is only one thread in the tapestry of survival. A healthy crew is useless if the ship itself succumbs to catastrophe. Over a journey spanning hundreds of years, the probability of a major crisis approaches certainty. It is not a question of asterisk, but asterisk when asterisk and asterisk what kind asterisk. Therefore, resilience is not a feature of the ship's design. It is the central governing principle that informs every other system, from engineering to social training. The ship must be built to absorb staggering shocks and keep functioning. The first line of defence is physical redundancy. There is no single point of failure. Every critical system has a backup, and often a backup for the backup. There are multiple water purification lines, several independent power reactors spaced along the spine, duplicate communication arrays, and several large fabricator units. These are not just sitting idle. They're cycled into use regularly so that when the primary fails, the secondary is already warmed up and operational. The ship's layout is also designed for containment, modelled on the watertight compartments of a sea-going vessel. The habitation ring and the spine are divided into sectors by heavy, automated bulkhead doors. In the event of a hull breach, a major fire, or a toxic gas release, sensors trigger the immediate sealing of that sector. This contains the damage and preserves the atmosphere in the rest of the ship. People might be trapped, but they are not doomed. Each sector has its own localised life support cache and communication links to coordinate rescue. This compartmentalisation applies to the ecosystem as well. The agricultural biomes are not one vast contiguous farm. They are a series of independent modules, each with its own slightly different cultivar mix and environmental controls. A blight or pest outbreak in one module can be physically isolated, its atmosphere sterilised, and the module repopulated from seed banks and clean stock from other modules. The goal is to prevent any single disaster from cascading into total failure. The ship's AI is the nervous system that manages this resilience. It is constantly running what-if simulations, stress testing the ship's systems against thousands of hypothetical scenarios. A large micrometeoroid strike near the propulsion spine, a sudden coolant leak in Reactor 2, a simultaneous crop failure in 2 major grain modules. These simulations update the predictive maintenance schedules and inform the evolution of emergency protocols. When a real crisis hits, the AI's role is to stabilise the situation. It will instantly seal compartments, reroute power, shut down leaking lines, and present the human command crew with a prioritised list of actions, damage assessments and resource status. It buys time for the humans to think, but the AI cannot do everything. It cannot wield a cutting torch to clear debris, it cannot comfort a trapped child, and it cannot make the agonising ethical choices that some crises will demand. That is where the human element of resilience comes in, and it is cultivated through relentless training. From a very young age, every crew member is drilled in emergency procedures. They are not just taught to run to a safe zone, they are taught why the procedures exist. School children practice putting on emergency breathers and finding alternate routes home if their primary corridor is blocked. Adolescents train as damage control teams, learning to patch simulated hull leaks, fight electrical fires in a training simulator, and operate manual overrides for automated systems. Adults participate in regular ship-wide drills that the AI orchestrates with unpredictable complications. A drill might start as a simple reactor scram, but escalate into a simulated radiation leak and a medical emergency in a sealed sector. The goal is to create muscle memory and calm. Panic is the real enemy in a closed system. A stampede or irrational action can doom more people than the initial disaster. The culture therefore values cool-headed competence under pressure above almost all else. Heroes are not those who take reckless solo actions, but those who follow protocol, communicate clearly, and keep their team working together. This mindset is reinforced in daily life. The society's emphasis on interdependence and collective responsibility, discussed earlier, is the psychological bedrock for crisis response. You're not just saving yourself, you're saving the intricate machine that keeps your family and your future alive. Beyond technical and training resilience, the ship must be intellectually and materially adaptable. The vast libraries of knowledge and the sophisticated fabrication systems mean the crew is not stuck with only the tools they launched with. If a unique part fails in a way never anticipated, engineers can design a new one and print it. If a new social conflict pattern emerges, the Governing Council can study historical analogues and draft new mediation protocols. This capacity for self-reinvention is crucial. The voyage will present puzzles the founders never imagined. Perhaps a strange resonance develops in the rotating hull after a century, requiring a rebalancing of mass. Maybe a social schism emerges based on whether one's family worked in the agricultural rim or the technical axis, requiring a new political structure. The ability to diagnose, debate, and implement a solution without tearing the society apart is the ultimate test of resilience. The most insidious crises are the slow, creeping ones, the gradual decline in a recycling efficiency, the subtle increase in interpersonal grievances, the generational drift in mission commitment. These are not solved by sealing bulkheads. They are solved by the cultural institutions of education, art, and governance. The regular retelling of the mission's purpose, the celebration of milestones, the shared ownership of the ship's destiny. These are the buffers against existential despair. A population that finds meaning in the journey itself is resilient against the psychological corrosion of deep time. Finally, the ship's design must allow for the ultimate contingency, a change of destination. What if, after 500 years of travel, the target star system is found to be utterly hostile, its planets bombarded by radiation or shattered by collisions? The mission cannot simply end. The ship's AI, using telescopes and data gathered during approach, would identify this early. The command crew would then face a monumental decision: attempt a dangerous braking maneuver anyway to search for resources, or use the star's gravity to swing onto a new course toward a secondary destination, adding centuries to the journey. This decision would be based on the hard numbers of remaining resources, the health of the population, and the viability of the ship's systems. Having this option requires that the ship carry extra margin in its fuel and life support capabilities, a costly but potentially civilization-saving investment. In the end, resilience is about options. It is about having a backup system, a trained crew, a spare part, an alternate plan, and the moral fortitude to choose. The ship is not a delicate china vase moving through a vacuum. It is a rugged, self-repairing, thinking entity designed to endure a relentless gauntlet of time and chance. Its success is not defined by a perfect, uneventful voyage, but by its capacity to survive the inevitable imperfections, to bend without breaking, and to deliver its precious cargo of life to a new shore, despite the universe's best efforts to stop it. Every weld, every protocol, every lesson taught to a child is a stitch in a safety net that must hold for 1,000 years. The reasons are manifold. It is a hedge against extinction, ensuring that if disaster befalls Earth, humanity and its companion species live on elsewhere. It is an expression of the innate human drive to explore, to push boundaries, to see what is over the next hill, even if the hill is light years high. It is an exercise in long-term thinking and collective action on a scale never before attempted, a proof that humanity can plan and execute projects that transcend individual lifespans for a common good. But on a deeper, more emotional level, it is an act of hope. It is a deliberate, defiant vote for a future. It says that we believe life and consciousness are worth propagating into the cosmos, that our stories and our children deserve more than one fragile planet. The ship is the physical manifestation of that hope, a bottle carrying a message of life into the cosmic ocean. For the crew, especially the generations born en route, this abstract hope becomes their concrete reality. Their purpose is not to dream of a new world, but to build it, first in the microcosm of the ship's society, and then on a planetary scale. They are the embodiment of a continuity that refuses to end. The legacy they carry is not a burden, but an identity. They are the people of the voyage, and their story, from launch to landing, becomes the founding myth of a new branch of human civilization. When their descendants finally walk under an alien sun, breathing air they did not recycle, eating food grown in dirt they did not bring, they will do so because centuries before, people they never knew believed in a future they would never see, and built a ship to carry that future across the stars. That chain of belief, dedication and love is the true propulsion system, the most resilient shield, and the final triumphant legacy of the first interstellar colony ship.